You probably pictured this 1,000 times. A tribe of 40 people crammed into one cave, no walls, no doors, everyone seeing everything, everyone hearing everything, total exposure, zero privacy. That's the story we've been told about ancient humans. It's also, according to the archaeological record, almost completely wrong. Let's start with the assumption itself, because it's worth naming exactly where it comes from. Most of what we picture when we imagine cavemen isn't archaeology. It's set design. Decades of documentaries and movies have given us the same image over and over. One big fire, one big room, everybody piled together like a litter of puppies. No concept of mine or alone. It's a useful shorthand for storytelling. It is not what the evidence actually shows. Here's the thing, privacy isn't a wall. It's a behavior, and behaviors leave traces even when the walls don't survive. Archaeologists working prehistoric dwelling sites across Europe, Africa, and Asia keep finding a pattern that doesn't fit the one big room story at all. Excavations of Upper Paleolithic sites, some dating back over 20,000 years, show internal divisions inside dwellings, not accidental gaps, deliberate ones. Separate heart space consistently apart from each other rather than clustered into a single communal fire. Distinct sleeping areas marked by different flooring materials, different debris patterns, different tool concentrations. Someone was organizing the space on purpose, and the purpose looks a lot like what we'd now call rooms. Take the famous Upper Paleolithic sites at Dolní Věstonice in the modern Czech Republic. Multiple hearts, multiple activity zones, clear separation between areas used for toolmaking, areas used for sleeping, and areas used for food processing. That's not random scatter. That's zoning. That's a group of people deciding collectively that different activities, and by extension different people, belonged in different places. This alone should already complicate the total exposure myth. But it gets more specific than architecture. Ethnographic studies of contemporary and historically documented hunter-gatherer societies, the closest living approximation we have to how ancient humans actually organize daily life, consistently documents something anthropologists call social distancing norms, not the pandemic kind, the much older kind, roles, almost always unspoken, about who can approach whom, when, and where. Among groups like the Juhoansi of the Kalahari, researchers have documented specific spatial etiquette. Certain conversations, particularly around courtship, conflict, or grief, are expected to happen away from the main camp, out of earshot of children, out of earshot of extended family. Nobody writes this rule down. Nobody needs to. Everyone in the group already knows where the boundary sits, and everyone respects it without being told. That's privacy. It doesn't require a door. It requires a shared understanding of when someone deserves to not be watched. There's also a specific and slightly startling category of evidence involving grief. Burial practices at multiple Paleolithic sites show individuals interred separately from communal living spaces, sometimes with specific personal items, sometimes imposters suggesting a deliberate, private ritual rather than a public one. Researchers studying sites like Sungir in Russia, roughly 34,000 years old, have found burials with an extraordinary density of personal ornamentation, thousands of individually crafted beads, ranged in ways that suggest significant private ritual investment around a single person's death. This isn't communal spectacle. This looks like something closer to intimate, restricted mourning. Now here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because privacy isn't just about physical space. It's about information. Anthropologists studying oral tradition in small-scale societies have identified something called restricted knowledge. Information deliberately not shared with the entire group. Certain stories, certain practical knowledge, certain ritual details are transmitted only to specific individuals, often based on age, gender, or earned status within the group. This isn't secrecy for its own sake. It's a system. Knowledge gets compartmentalized on purpose, which means the concept of some people know this and some people don't isn't a modern invention. It's ancient, and it required exactly the kind of social infrastructure, trust, discretion, boundaries, that privacy depends on. Think about what that actually requires cognitively. To keep information restricted, you need a theory of mind sophisticated enough to track who knows what. You need social rules sophisticated enough to enforce discretion without formal law. You need enough trust in the group's boundaries that revealing a secret carries real social weight. None of that is possible in a species living in total and differentiated exposure. Total exposure and restricted knowledge cannot coexist. If ancient humans were operating one, they weren't operating the other. There's a genuinely underrated piece of evidence here involving courtship specifically. Multiple ethnographic accounts of hunter-gatherer societies document deliberate physical separation for courting couples. Small shelters set slightly apart from the main camp, understood by everyone as off-limits for casual approach. Among some documented groups, Young couples are given explicit social permission to withdraw from communal space during courtship, a kind of sanctioned privacy zone that the rest of the group actively protects by simply not going there. That's not the absence of social structure. That's a social structure specifically built to produce privacy. So if the physical and social evidence both point towards some form of private space and private information, why does the total exposure myth persist so stubbornly? Part of it is genuinely just visibility bias in the archaeological record. Walls make privacy visible to us thousands of years later. A silent social agreement to look away during a private conversation leaves no artifact. A deliberately placed hearth leaves stone and ash. The behaviors that are hardest to prove are often the ones that mattered most day to day, and the ones that are easiest to prove, physical divisions, only survive when the materials happen to last. We're not looking at the full picture. We're looking at whatever fraction of the picture happened to fossilize. The other part is simpler and a little more uncomfortable. We've built an entire mental model of prehistoric humans as fundamentally less sophisticated than us, socially as well as technologically. No smartphones, no cities, no writing, so surely no concept of personal boundaries either. But social complexity and technological complexity are not the same axis. A group with zero written language can still maintain an intricate, universally understood system of who gets to know what, who gets to be where, and who gets left alone. In some ways, a purely oral, face-to-face society has to be even more precise about these boundaries, because there's no lock, no door, no legal system to fall back on if the unspoken rules get ignored. The entire system runs on trust and enforcement by the group itself, which raises a genuinely strange thought. Our version of privacy is arguably the more fragile one. We've outsourced it to physical objects, locks, walls, passwords, and when those objects fail, the privacy fails with them. Ancient privacy, if the evidence holds up, was baked directly into the social fabric. It didn't depend on hardware. It depended on the entire group agreeing, generation after generation, to honor certain boundaries even when nothing physical was stopping anyone from crossing them. There's one more layer we're sitting with, because it connects this directly back to you. The instinct to seek out solitude, to want a specific space that's yours, to feel a particular kind of relief when you close a door and nobody's watching. That instinct almost certainly predates doors entirely. It's not a modern luxury invented by architecture. It's an old need that architecture eventually caught up to. Every time you crave a moment alone, you're not indulging some uniquely modern craving for personal space. You're running software that's tens of thousands of years old, built for a world that had figured out how to give people privacy long before it had figured out how to build a wall. So the next time you picture that cave, the fire, the crowd, all of it, try adding one more detail to the scene. Somewhere just out of firelight, slightly apart from the group, there's a spot. Everyone knows it's spoken for tonight. Nobody looks, nobody follows. Not because there's a door, because there never needed to be one.